Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about Orfeia by Joanne M. Harris, illustrated by Bonnie Hawkins. The story revolves around a woman in London named Orfeia, in this book shortened to Faye, wink wink, who is an ex-singer. She lost her husband years ago, but the book picks up with the main character after the death of her daughter by her own hand, which occurs after recurring dreams of a shadowless stranger. In the throes of grief and her life sort of collapsing around her, her psychiatrist suggests that she throw herself into exercise as a distraction. Orfeia runs. She runs obsessively. Her daughter had an obsession with pavement cracks, avoiding them compulsively, and now at the end of her tether, Orfeia falls through those cracks. She stumbles into an empty London and sees her daughter through the gaps in the world. A strange man called Alberon tells her that her daughter sleeps, a captive and ward of the Halloween king. So she embarks on a journey through the layers of reality, the layers of fairy, descending to retake her daughter from the jaws of death. So this book draws heavily from two sources, the first of which is Francis James Child's The Child's Ballads, which are more than 300 traditional folklore songs from England and Scotland collected in the 1800s. I've spoken a bit more about that in my other video where I reviewed Joanne Harris's other book, The Blue Salt Road, which also took inspiration from The Child's Ballads. It's a Selkie story. I'll leave a link for that up at the end. It's a really fantastic book. Highly recommend it. The second source that this draws from is Orfeo, the 1607 opera, or the Greek myth that is based on the myth of Orpheus, in which Orpheus travels through Hades, the Greek underworld, to reclaim his dead wife Eurydice. This is a story of a levelized descent to reclaim a loved one from something impossible, and it's a very old story-themed classic. This lies almost perfectly halfway between Dante's Inferno and Alice in Wonderland. And if you like that theme as a story, the book I've read that did it best was Venice Underground by Jeff Vandermeer. Highly recommend you check that out. It's definitely worth a read. So I'll talk about the non-spoiler stuff as much as I can, then move on to other bits that will probably ruin the story, but I'll tell you when they're coming, don't worry. There'll be stuff I like, stuff I wasn't so sure about. Here we go. The first thing I'd like to touch on is actually a question, and if anybody knows the answer to it, pop it down in the comments, I'd really appreciate it. Several folk stories I've read from Scottish folklore talk about somewhere called Norroway, like the Black Bull of Norroway, and the Child's Ballad that this draws from, called the Elfin Knight, mentions it as well. My played away, and over the hill and far away to Norroway, my played shall not be blown away. Is it literally an alternate spelling for Norway? If so, why? Or is it making reference to some magical fairy-like kingdom called Norroway that's a completely separate thing? I have no idea. So if you know, educate me. Like a lot of classical myth revolving around fairies, the lines here between fairy and the land of the dead are unclear, they're very blurred. The style the story is written in is hazy and disjointed. It really captures the feeling of a dream, leaping from scene to scene with little connection. Recurring imagery, recurring themes, and this complete disorientation. I really like how it uses the theme of falling into the cracks, people ending up in another world just completely by accident. It's used literally, but also as a metaphor for people's perception of the world around them just shifting completely after a traumatic event. I like the interpretation of "my plaid shall not be blown away" to mean carry your old life with you and hang tooth and claw onto it to not forget where you're from. In this story, as Orfeia descends through the layers of reality with various warped iterations of London, there's this idea that everything she takes, everything she accepts from these worlds, will cost her a piece of her shadow, and a memory will vanish from her previous life. That's a common fairy theme. Classically, fairies exert power over you by robbing you of your memory, making you indentured, by accepting what they offer, and holding power over you by making you believe that you owe them. I love the idea of fairy less as sort of an idyllic Shangri-La, but more of a dangerous barbed wire trap. As much as this book played well the classical tune, I had a few issues with it. Stuff that I wasn't sure about or somehow detracted from my enjoyment of the story. This stuff's going to be issues with the storyline or the world build, so it's going to be spoilers from here. But read this book if you like beautiful books. Read this if you're a folklore nut and you like fairies like me. But don't go past here if you haven't read it yet, or if you don't care about it being spoiled. One of my favourite very specific genres is magical realism in modern day London, so I guess this kind of falls into that. And while I like the idea of worlds existing underneath our own, the person I think who is unbeatable in this aspect is Neil Gaiman in Neverwhere. I like how the distortion increases along the journey until the last scene is just pure fairy. But my question was kind of, why does fairy look like a distorted London? In the book, it talks about the main character being a native of Fairy who lost her memory and is returning. She built the world, our world, as a complete dream for her to escape into, as a construct in her head to get away from the grief. The story implies that everything exists within the river of dream, everything is a dream of something else, and that reality is just the dual states of dream and death. But I feel like there was kind of an implication here that Fairy is sort of the base world. So if the path from London to the land of the dead is fairy, why does it look like London? And if it's not fairy, why were there fairy characters in it? Is the fact that it looks like London implying that everybody has their own unique road to death? So are the figures she meets as she travels figments of her imagination? It's very unclear. Also, if fairy is the place that Orfeia is from, then is the attempt to steal her memories the devilry of fairies? Or is it an attempt by the residents of her original world to bring her back from a dream? The character Alberon that she meets tries to steal her memories, but the memories he tries to take are memories of the reason she's coming back to Fairy anyway. So is he trying to keep her? Is he trying to keep her away? We're not sure, really. Is this fairy tale something that's actually happening? Or is the whole thing a metaphor for somebody losing their mind, dealing with their grief, and the end lesson of the story being acceptance of death? Other little minor things I wasn't sure about. She meets a girl on the way to look for her daughter, take her daughter back from a Halloween King who has a tiger. The girl claims to be from the travelling folk. She tells her not to trust the silken folk, so I'm guessing the silken folk refers to classical fairies, but it's not explained, and it's never mentioned again after this one scene. And she says later the girl looks like her daughter's favourite toy was a tiger. So who was the girl? It never explains that. If her daughter died in the real world, but exists in fairy, and the Halloween King owns all the shadows, the memories of these people who are dead, including her daughter, and she takes the throne of the Halloween King right at the end of the book, why does she send her daughter back to the real world? Why does she not keep her daughter, restore her daughter's memories, restore her own memories, because she has jurisdiction over that because she's the Halloween Queen? I wasn't sure whether the Halloween King was death, or was a personification of death, or was the title given to the person that governs death. The last act of the book was hard to follow for me. The Earl King, the governor of the Wild Hunt classically, in this book is said to be the same as the Elfin Knight, and the same as the Halloween King. But since the Earl King is such a big folkloric figure, but his qualities as that figure were never mentioned in here, I'm not sure of the relevance of tying that in at all, aside from making the Halloween King seem more important. I don't know why that was mentioned as a facet of his character. My very last thing I'll say is that I thought the illustrations by Bonnie Hawkins, the same illustrator, in the last book were gorgeous, fantastic. In this one, it felt like they were really well done, but didn't lend anything to the story at all. They all looked like the front covers of Mills and Boon books, like cheap pulp erotica novels, to the point where I just wish I'd read this whole thing with no pictures at all. So I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars, and that's me being generous. Half marks, I guess. I love the other one so much, but this one just didn't hit the same at all. I still enjoyed it. I'd say read it, but there were so many things making me go, what? I couldn't get invested in the story as much as I did a previous one. So that's it. There will be some content warnings for this book, which I'll pop down below. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. I'll pop that down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There's more videos coming all the time, thick and fast. Read pretty quick. If you've read this, let me know what you thought. If I'm completely wrong, tell me I'm wrong. If you know what Norroway is, tell me what Norroway is. I'm interested to know. So thanks very much for watching this review, and I'll see you soon. Bye!